Hello and welcome back to Minds Unbound, everybody. I am Sophia here with my lovely co host, Yondra. And due to today's episode content, I have to issue a disclaimer. A viewer discretion is advised. A lot of the things that's going to be mentioned in today's episode could be triggering for some viewers if you are sensitive, especially in matters involving harmed children or like a grape situation. Then you might want to skip this episode.
That is very true, Sophia. So, what is this topic we're diving into today? Well, it's trafficking. And just how serious this issue is. So, we dug as deep as we could, and some of the facts that we learned, it will shock you to your very core. We will also be sharing some real life experiences from survivors who we will be calling Sarah and Brenda to protect their identities. We will also be sharing our own personal stories.
We thought we would start out by giving everyone some statistics to think long and hard on. Like the United States is the highest consumers of child pornography in the entire world. And they also have more children that are trafficked to this country than out of it.
Wow, that just makes me sick to my stomach, Sophia. But that is a sickening truth. And here are some more statistics for everyone. The average times a day sex trafficking victims get raped is between 30 and 50 times a day. Or to clarify even better, that means that they would be raped 20,000 to 50,000 times between the ages of 13 to 17. But remember that a lot of sex trafficking victims can range in ages from 2 years old to 17. So, Sophia, I want to ask you, why is human trafficking such a widespread issue globally, and what makes it so difficult to eradicate?
Well, a lot of the problem with human trafficking, it's persists due to factors like poverty and luck, or lack of education and instability in regions. Experiencing conflict or economic hardships. So traffickers will tend to exploit vulnerable populations and stuff like that. Additionally, trafficking is profitable, and the secretive nature of these networks makes it challenging, for law enforcement to dismantle them and, get a grip on it.
Wow.
So what are some of the primary ways traffickers recruit and control their victims, Yondra?
Well, I'm glad you asked. This is a great topic here. Traffickers actually often use manipulation, deception, false job offers, or they even use abduction to lure their victims. And once they get them under their control, they're kept in compliance through physical abuse or threats to their families or further psychological manipulation. Even financial control is another one of their tools.
Wow.
Now, tell me, which regions of the world have the highest incidence of trafficking and why?
Well, like Southeast Asia, Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe, they often report higher trafficking rates. Um, common factors include poverty, conflict, corruption, and high demand for like cheap labor, or sex work is wealthier, in wealthier countries that fuels the exploitation of vulnerable populations.
Well, is there a link between human trafficking and organized crime?
Well, yes, actually, organized crime syndicates are heavily, very heavily involved in trafficking, treating it as like a lucrative business almost. They look at these kids like they're, nothing but, a income. Other illegal activities like drugs and arms trafficking, are also involved. Their resources and reach make trafficking operations difficult to disrupt, basically.
Wow.
Um, okay, so how do traffickers exploit legal and social loopholes to continue their operations?
Thanks for asking that question. Well, to answer this one, traffickers often exploit weak or inconsistent laws. They also use corrupt officials and unmonitored migration routes. In some societies, cultural taboos around discussing sexual exploitation further prevent victims from seeking help. And I know that this has been the experience in my own life and many others that have gone through situations like this. So those are very real reasons. So what role does the internet play in modern human trafficking?
Well, the internet has made recruitment a lot easier for traffickers who use social media to lure victims with promises of jobs or romance. Online platforms also allow traffickers to advertise victims and communicate with clients in autonomy, complicating efforts to combat, trafficking, which is very sad.
Yeah, it is very sad.
Okay, so how has human trafficking evolved in recent years, especially with like technology advancements?
Well, technology, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's expanded traffickers' reach, and it's actually allowed them to have new methods of exploitation, like webcams, sexual exploitation, and the use of cryptocurrencies for transactions so they can't be traced. While it helps traffickers, technology also provides law enforcement with new tools for tracing and disrupting trafficking networks. So that is, one of the good sides of it.
Yeah, that's true. So, are there any success stories or examples of initiatives that have helped reduce trafficking?
Yes. Initiatives actually like Operation Underground Railroad and programs from the International Labor Organization have rescued victims and raised awareness. Comprehensive anti-trafficking laws, community education, and survivor support, these things have also made impacts in certain regions. So tell me, Sophia, what happens to trafficking victims once they're rescued?
Well, it really depends on, how they get rescued. But like many victims, they face so many challenges reintegrating into society, including trauma and stigmatization, and also as well as a lack of education or job skills. Successful recovery often requires very comprehensive services, including counseling and education, and as well as legal assistance too, um, which is very sad.
Yeah.
So, why do some trafficking victims refuse to seek help or attempt to escape? Do you think?
Well, in some cases, victims may fear retaliation against themselves or their families. They distrust authorities now, or experiencing psychological trauma and manipulation may be preventing them. Some victims have also become so financially dependent on their traffickers, it makes escape seem literally impossible.
Wow, that's sad, man. So, how do international laws and agreements help, like, combat trafficking, and are they even effective?
Great question. Treaties like the Palermo Protocol have established a global framework for combating trafficking, but the effectiveness still varies. Enforcement, it's often lacking, and cross-border cooperation can also be complex. Though the framework does raise global awareness and standards. Sophia, what can ordinary people do to help fight human trafficking?
Well, people can they can support anti-trafficking organizations and educate themselves. Stop turning a blind eye to this problem, and also educate others. Report suspicious activities, and always, be cautious. Consumers, to avoid products made, with forced labor. Um, because there's more than one more than one way to traffic someone. Volunteering and advocating with nonprofit organizations like Our Rescue, which I advocate for Our Rescue, which they rescue children from traffickers and place them in safe houses. And talk to your legislatures, for stronger laws, so that they can, that can make all the difference in the world sometimes.
Right, exactly. Those are great suggestions. What are some of the signs that someone might be a victim of sex trafficking? And how can ordinary people recognize and report these signs safely?
Well, pay attention to signs. There's always signs, like bruising, signs of abuse, branding, usually like with tattoos of sexual innuendos or malnourishment, things like that. Not making eye contact, if they don't speak too much, or they don't speak without permission, they will appear sometimes fearful and even submissive. I'm not saying that every, abuse case is trafficking, but it could be. So why take the chance on not reporting it if you suspect someone, is being trafficked? Yeah, and you can always go or call and make a report at the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline, and that number is going to be 888-373-7888. Or you can always call 911 as well. So can you discuss for us, Yondra, if you will, the psychological impact on victims of sex trafficking and the challenges that they face during recovery and integration into society?
Yeah, absolutely. The psychological impact trafficking has on survivors, it can be absolutely devastating. Due to the extraordinary physical, sexual, and psychological violence that they endure, they often experience anxiety, emotional numbness, memory loss, depression, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, self harm, and they often have trust issues. And then there's much more than that, even, unfortunately.
So now I think it would be a good place to share our two listeners, Sarah and Brenda, as well as our stories. Don't you think, Yondra?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go ahead and tell us your story? What was your experience?
So I had my youngest son. He was maybe like I want to say he was probably 2 months old, if that. I don't even know if he was that. I know he still had his cast on because when he was born his leg was broken. Well, anyways, I had him in his little infant seat, and we was up at Walmart. I had to go get some diapers and stuff. So, anyways, I got what I needed, and I never even noticed that anybody like following me or nothing around the store. I know that the cashier had later told the police when they ended up pulling the people over that she had seen them following me, up to the register. So she, that's why I guess they had initially made her nervous. But so anyways, and I'm up there at the cash register, and and I'm trying to get all the stuff out of the buggy and put it in on the thingy, and anyways, and Gabriel was still sitting in, I had him strapped in the car seat carrier thing, and anyways, and I did notice that there was two men that were behind me. They were Hispanic men, and they were behind me, and they were, they kept saying stuff, which it was in Spanish, and I don't know Spanish, and so had no clue what they were even saying or something. And so anyways, she went to tell me my total, and when she did, she's like, I'm going to call the manager up here to walk you out to your car. And I'm like, why? And she was like, Well, because those two guys are just making me very uncomfortable and nervous. She said, so I'm just going to go ahead and call the manager to walk you out to your car because you do have a small baby and it's just you. And I was like, oh, what? And I turned around and I said, yeah, if you try to take this kid, you're going to leave with some eyeballs gone. So you won't be taking nobody's kid after that. I said, so you better hope Google can translate that for you. And they just like looked at me like, what is she saying? So anyway, she went ahead and called the manager up there, and they did. Now, and the manager walked me on out to my car, and he stood right there, by me while I was putting everything into the car and stuff. And he even watched it. And then they had already called the police. And as I was pulling out of the parking lot, that truck, that those two guys was in was following me out of the parking lot. And they pulled them over before they could pull all the way out of the parking lot. And so, I just went and I went on past down my road and went on down to the other stoplight so that way they couldn't see where I turned or nothing. But yeah, that was a very, when I got home, actually, I was like, oh my God, but I mean, I kept, I think that that's a lot of the reasons why I'm such a helicopter mom and stuff like that over Gabriel as well now is because, and I do, watch him, I don't let him get without, this far from me or his daddy, because I've seen them on videos walk up and you could be standing there with your kid holding your kid's hand and they'll snatch them right away from you. They don't give a shit, and it's alarming and it's terrifying because, and to know that we live in a world like that where our kids can't, when we were kids, we played outside all day long, all day from the time that the street lights, and until the street lights come on, and never was even bothered. I remember like most of my childhood, I played outside in our storm cellar that me and my mom had fixed up like my own little apartment, because I was jealous of my baby brother. And so anyways, I would stay down there like most of the day by myself playing at 5 years old. Nobody ever bothered me. Now you leave your kids alone for 5 minutes and somebody's liable to come up there and snatch them. And it's terrifying,
Right.
So I can only imagine.
Now, did this happen when your experience, did this happen in Arkansas or was it someplace else? Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
here in Arkansas, which
Yeah.
really kind of made me, which really alarmed me, I guess, worse because it's like, things, people, go missing, quite a bit, but nothing like that. I've never heard it, and then it wasn't too long, not too long ago, actually, I heard it on our scanner one day that they said a girl was up there at Walmart again, and somebody actually tried to snatch her, tried to drag her into their vehicle, out in the parking lot. And I'm going, that's when I actually stopped leaving my apartment complex. And I actually don't. I haven't left my apartment complex in like 2 years. I go outside, wow, but I haven't left the complex itself for like 2 years because of
Wow.
that crap.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It will definitely shake you to the core. Absolutely. And thank God your intuition was working overtime that day, because can you imagine if you had just been a little bit more sleep deprived or, just not aware, and your whole life can change in an instant. And once you're taken, the chances of being returned or having your child returned.
Yeah, because they would have probably taken us both, of course they would have taken us both, but because, and I think, I called up there I went up there and I thanked that manager and that girl both. I told them, I was like, I can never be able to repay you guys for, paying attention to that and noticing, because normally they usually wouldn't notice something like that. Most people aren't paying attention to stuff like that, and the fact that they were, to that extent. Yeah, it really, I was grateful, I really much was.
I do feel like sharing these stories has really helped to raise awareness for a lot of people now. I've heard of a lot of situations where there are vans, suspicious characters, things lurking around Target parking lots and Walmart parking lots and places like that, even Home Depot, I've heard. And yeah, they're there. They usually have women working with their operation who help to make the children seem like they can trust them. And they just distract them, have the parent look one direction and grab the people or grab the child and throw them in the van, and they're gone in a second. For my experience,
your experience is very scary. To me it was,
mine was almost, I feel like, textbook, kind of strange. I just feel like if anybody could ever be almost trafficked but not be trafficked, that's the best of both worlds almost, even though it was horrifying. But just because I escaped, I wasn't the worst case scenario, you know. I was just temporarily taken. But when mine happened, it was in a little town called Yakima, Washington, up in the Pacific Northwest. And it's a nice little suburban area, just like many cities, like a smaller size city, like maybe Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I was on a walk with my mom. We had my dog, the same dog that had saved me from a fire, or would save me from a fire a few years in the future. But at this point, I was in third grade. It was about 1988. So this is during the time we were all playing out free range kids. Nobody was worried about a thing. However, there were messages coming out at the schools that I was attending at that time that were informing us to look out for strangers, stranger danger. Thank God for that, because when we met this gentleman, he was a Hispanic man. He had broken English. He spoke broken English, very warm and friendly. Stopped my mother and I on a little stroll. We were walking our dog. Bullet was her name, walking her home. And like I said, she'd had a litter of puppies that we'd adopted out, and there were maybe 6 of them, I think. And this fellow, he saw us walking through the alley, walking back home, and he stopped us because he saw our dog, and we got to talking to him. And of course, I was just sitting there, my mom, and he realized that he had actually had adopted one of our dog's puppies. His children had, his adult children, yes. And he told my mom, you know, we have these beautiful bunny rabbits in the backyard, just on the other side of the garage. We're raising them. And so if your daughter ever wants to come over and play with the puppy or see our beautiful little brand new litter of bunny rabbits that we just had, she's welcome to stop by anytime. Now, he said this in broken English, but my mom got the gist of it. And she was like, of course, absolutely, no problem. Anytime you want to stop her by, then that's not an issue. So it was maybe a week or 2 later, I was walking home, and sometimes I went down this alley, depending on which friends I walked home with. And this day I was by myself, and he happened to be standing outside the garage. And he said, hey, you're here, I'm here, again in broken English. Why don't you come on in? We just had a new litter of baby bunny rabbits. You can come check them out. And I said, yes, you're right. My mom had already given me permission. It's not a big deal. It's only, you know, a few houses down where we live. So I come straight through the garage. As soon as I get in through the door, he slams the door shut behind me and puts a padlock on it. And he says, it's just right through this way, don't worry. And he starts walking over to the other door that's clear across the garage, to where I guess the backyard is, which is what is described as housed between the front house and the garage. But then I look to my left, and it's wintertime at this point, so I had a snowsuit on. And I looked to my left, and I saw that there was this stark white twin bed with nothing on it but a white sheet. And immediately my stomach started sinking, and I realized I was in deep trouble. And I was like, well, let's go. And he comes and walks back over to me, and he says, no. And he just starts trying to talk to me and offer me candy. And I started saying, I can't have candy from strangers. And I kept saying, what is your name? What is your name? Because I didn't know his name. And he wouldn't tell me. And he ends up pushing me onto the bed and starts, he starts, you know, trying to do stuff. And at this point, I'm panicking. I'm thinking in my head, I am in such deep crap. And I was, and he wasn't answering. I said, I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. I'm not supposed to take candy from strangers. And I said, I hear my mom. I said, do you hear that? Do you hear that? My mom is screaming for me. I can hear her calling. Can you hear her? I said, she's screaming right now. I gotta go. And eventually he let me out, and I ran to my house as fast as I could. And I got there, and I told my mom what had happened, and she did not react the way she should have. And I'm sure she regrets that now, but it's neither here nor there. And it continued. So that wasn't the last I saw this guy, because now he started following me to school with his friend.
Oh my God.
In a car, and trying to get me to get into the car every morning on my way walking to school. And he would offer me candy and hot chocolate, and there would be different people. And the last time it had happened, I remember I just screamed at him. I said, no. And I ran as fast as I could to the school. And at this point, I told a teacher. And I had also told a best friend of mine about it. and she had told her mom. And after that, this whole investigation blew up. And it turned out that a dear friend of mine that I'd had who had gone missing had actually been another one of this guy's victims. And he did end up going to jail, but he only served he only served 2 years. 2 years. So he was actually released. And when I was in 5th grade, he ended up finding me and my cousin at another school in the same town, across town, and chased us again, this time in a car with a whole car full of other adults. And we ended up hiding under shrubs. Like, I mean, it was high octane, very, very, very scary. But that was kind of like, I guess, my brush with,
that's just
trafficking.
insane that he only got 2 years, and then he ended up, even after 2 years, and then he comes and finds you again. You know, that's just insanity.
Yeah, I'm not probably supposed to mention, you know, my dad took the law into his own hands at that point.
I mean,
so we won't mention all that.
If that's what has to happen, then, you know, maybe, you know, grown men shouldn't be doing, you know, that too, you know. Yeah. Because what grade did you say that you were in the first time?
3rd grade. 3rd grade. I was only 8 years old. Yeah. 8 years old.
Yeah. They was 8 years old. I mean, like, seriously, like, I mean,
yeah, just a little kid. Yeah, but thank God I got out of that, because if he hadn't let me go, there was no way for me to get out. The entire thing was locked from the inside. I mean, there were padlocks. I wouldn't.
It's probably because you started screaming.
Yeah, and because I kept saying I heard my mom.
Yeah.
I think he might have gotten paranoid. He was an older man, so I was hoping that maybe we could play on his whole, like, maybe his hearing isn't as good as mine. Maybe he can't hear her screaming for me, but I can. You know, what if she's calling the cops? But
that was very smart of you to do that.
Thank you. I was you know.
I mean, that probably saved you from, you know, him, you know, doing worse.
Yeah, I mean, but unfortunately, though, a lot of girls in situations like that, they tend to withdraw, you know, and shut down. And that was my natural inclination too, is because you don't want to believe an adult is capable of hurting you like that, but you can't, because when the going gets tough, you got to get yourself out of the going.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. I mean, and you know, and that's the sad thing of it, you know, is that, well, you know, I was telling you about that documentary, the one that I had watched, you know, about, it was over in the Philippines and Indonesia and stuff like that. You know, over there, you know, whenever people gets pregnant with a girl, like, I mean, they see that as like, oh my God, congratulations, you're having a paycheck, you know. I mean, think about that. Like, I mean, that's, you're selling your own children, and you only think of them as and I don't, you know, don't get me wrong, I understand poverty. I mean, I grew up poor. I know what it's like to be poor. So I do. But my mother, she would have never sold me or my brother for nothing like that. She would have probably, you know, done like your dad and took things into her own hands, if they ever tried to do it. But she would go without food days on end, you know, so we would have food, but she would have never sold ever. She would have sold herself before she sold us, for sure.
Right. But I mean, it does make you wonder how the culture can slip into an area. Another story that we wanted to share today with this episode is a personal story of family members that are actually closely connected to me, and they've given permission to share their story, but we are changing their names to protect their identity. And this is a story of Sarah and Brenda. And this story also actually took place in the state of Washington, so the Pacific Northwest, just to give you an idea of where it was happening. And it spanned all the way actually over to, I believe it was Fresno, California. So what had happened is Brenda, at age 13, was a runaway. She ran away from home because of other circumstances that had precipitated that. And we'll get into that, I think, on our live after party. So if you didn't tune into that, go check it out. And so what had happened is she ran away, and because she had run away, she was placed into a foster home. Now, in this foster home, at 13 years of age, she was taken to Fresno, California, and she was taken into a fruit orchard every night by her foster parents, and they would sell her to no less than 12 to 15 men every single night. She had no choice. The circumstances were so traumatizing for her that it completely wiped her entire childhood memory out. She doesn't remember a single Christmas, a single Easter. She doesn't remember seeing her siblings growing up. She doesn't remember seeing her own parents growing up. She can't remember even existing as a human. But to make things even worse, as a result of being forced and subjugated to those horrible circumstances, she became pregnant from the grapes, from the violations. And she had no choice but to have the child at 13 years old. And this child only lived to 6 months old and died of pneumonia. Yeah, literally died of pneumonia. Yes. So she went through an absolutely horrifying situation. She did get out of this situation, fortunately. Her mother, once she learned of what had happened and where she was being held, she actually went and kidnapped her and brought her back and rescued her from those particular circumstances. But the damage was already done at that point. And this happened about 20 years before my situation happened, or at least 10 years before. So this happened 60s and 70s. So it just kind of goes to show just how dangerous things really have been all this time, and we really just haven't known about it. So in a way, I choose to actually not let that fear rule my life, because I've known many other people who have been through similar, very horrifying and traumatic experiences where, because of that fear, it changes their life and their ability to interact with life on such a scale that they're no longer even living fully, because that fear it's so insidious. And once it takes hold, it seems like it's really hard for them to gain their autonomy and identity again, But this person is one of the strongest humans I've ever known, one of the bravest humans I've ever known. She's very loving, and she herself now in her life actively seeks and rescues other individuals who are in similar situations and provides them with a safe harbor. Any resource she has, she extends to these people to give them a way out so that they're not in the same situation that she was in, which is beautiful and admirable, and very proud of that.
That's awesome. That's very awesome. I hate, that she had to go through that, but just to know that, she's took her, her trauma, and she's actually turned it into a way to help, other victims like that. So that's pretty, she sounds like she's an amazing person for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So now I wanted to go ahead before we close, and I just wanted to kind of mention a few more facts on some notes that I had taken. As I had mentioned, I have been advocating for the Our Rescue Foundation for over a year now, and so all of these notes had came from like our package thing that we get when we start basically start advocating and things like that. So, and by the way, so if anybody does want to, advocate, all you have to do is just go to their website and you can fill out the information, and then they send you like a kit that's just, it's like different, pictures of graphics and stuff that's got all the statistics and things like that on there. And all you're basically required to do is just post those, daily on your, social media accounts and things like that. And put like the hashtag our rescue on there. So and it's like it would take literally like 2 minutes of your time to do so. So if you did want to do that, just letting everybody know, that's all you would have to do. You can go to ourrescue.com and do that. So there's 49.6 million people around the world that are trapped in various forms of human trafficking. That includes forced labor, sexual exploitation, and other types of abuse. 12 million of those is children. There's 54% of those trapped in trafficking are women and young girls. So 54% of those are. And also, I just wanted to where's that at? This one right here. So here's a if it hasn't like gotten to you yet, here's numbers that will probably really just like it almost made me no lie, it almost made me puke the first time I heard this. Every 30 seconds a child is sold or for sex, organ harvesting, or labor. Every 30 seconds. So literally the time it took me to say that sentence to you, another kid has been sold.
It makes me nauseous.
It's very alarming. 6 million children alone are trafficked. They're being trafficked right now at this very moment. There are more people today that are in slavery than ever before in human history.
Wow.
Yeah, just let that again. Yeah, ever before. And this is talking about, back in the, you could actually take all of those numbers from every account of slavery from the beginning of our history and combine all of those numbers, and it still won't add up to what the amount of numbers that we've got today. That's very alarming. Yeah, it's terrifying. Here's some facts also just for the United States I wanted to mention, because there were 88 million child sexual abuse material cases, which are like it's the I don't know what you say, it's called SM or SCAM. Anyways, so there was 88 million of those cases that was reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that was just in the United States.
Wow.
88 million cases.
88 million?
88 million cases where they actually, and let me just go ahead and say, so child sexual abuse material, that's usually photos or videos of a child actually being, raped or abused or something done to them, wrong. And people are paying like they are paying for this shit. It's like, it's like, how is it, to know that our country has got that many, sick people like that in it? It's just, it makes me want to throw up everywhere. I mean, it's sickening.
It's from people looking the other way and not wanting to admit that it's happening. That's exactly what's causing it. So they see their family members doing this stuff. They see the signs. I've seen it in my own life. People around me, well, they see and what their family members are doing, and they want to look the other way. They don't want to admit it to themselves. There's too much denial of everything. It's a plague on the planet. Denial. It's pervasive. Everyone just denies everything ugly. Just pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And people cannot keep doing that. You can't keep turning a blind eye, because if you think that it's not happening in your town, in your country, you're full of shit, because it's happening in every country, in every town. It is happening. And so this is what I wanted you guys to do. I want you to stop just right now, whatever it is you're doing, whoever hears this, and I want you to look at your smallest child, whether they're 2 years old, a baby, 5 years old, 8 years old, whatever age. Stop and look at that child. Look really long and hard at that child and think about how much you love that kid. Now, imagine that kid just being snatched out of your arms one day and being sold into sex trafficking. And they're being raped over and over and over. And your kid's screaming, begging somebody to come and save them. You can't find your kid nowhere. You're searching for them, but you can't. And all this kid's doing is terrified. It's scared. There's men after men after men. I mean, just imagine that. Now, if you don't want that happening to your child, why do you give a shit that it's happening to somebody else's child? Why do you care that it's happening? Why don't you care that it's happening to anyone's child, for that matter? Right. Why are you not standing up saying something?
I think people, maybe they just don't know how to say something, or what to say, or who to say it to. It seems, even like when we've looked into it, the problem seems so big, it seems insurmountable. But just like we've talked about, there is a better way. There's a whole framework that we could completely eliminate this from happening to anyone ever again. That's literally the worst part of all of this, is that just like those statistics you just uttered to us, none of those children have to be going missing right now. None of them have to be going through these horrifying circumstances anymore. we have the information and the technology now that we can stop that from happening. We can implement transparent currencies to where we know where it's being traced, where we can see every person, where they're going, where we know where they're at, you know? And so it's horrible because we know that there's things that can be done to stop it. And
it's a simple thing, you know, it's a simple thing. It's a very simple thing. All you have to do is change from one society to another society. And then the problem is fixed. It's like, you know, it's like, it makes no logical sense. It really doesn't. Like, I mean, why continue to want to stay in this consumer society when we could easily be in the creative society where we would have everybody around the world? It wouldn't just be in the United States or one place. It would be equal around the world. Everybody would have income. They would have food. They wouldn't have to sell their children anymore for food and for income and whatever, you know, nonsense, you know. I mean, you wouldn't have to do that because the creative society provides everybody with those things. So therefore that would all be eliminated. And not only that, but all of the kids that are currently missing would be found and taken, you know, out of those situations. I mean, people has got to stop being stupid and wake the fuck up. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
Yeah, I think too, if they just realize that the solution is so much closer within our reach than it's ever been before, and to stop telling themselves the same old rhetoric that we've been telling ourselves for so long, that there's nothing we can do, because we can now. And this has been thoroughly researched by experts, and it's legitimate, and it works, and it's going to work. And we, you know, children cannot continue going through this. It's intolerable. It's intolerable.
Yeah. And see, we're just talking about the sex trafficking. We didn't even touch base on the, you know, what they do to them, you know, when they're doing the adrenochrome, you know, and how many kids that's actually, you know, are being, and the kids that are being, you know, kidnapped and stuff like that for organ harvesting. I mean, like literally harvesting them for their organs. I mean, because they're not pretty enough to be trafficked. I mean, just think that's going on. You're allowing that to go on in your world because you don't want to speak up. We get that it's scary. We do. We're well aware of what happens to people that do speak against that. But if everybody keeps their mouth shut, then nothing will ever get solved. Nothing will ever be better. Nothing will ever change. But if everybody stands together and speaks together, they will listen, and they have to stop, and things will have to change.
Well said. Well said. Yes, I agree.
Yes.
I agree. Absolutely. The first step is knowing and listening to this information, and information like this, even though it is a lot to take in. But also, too, remember, if you do have any questions, get involved. Talk to us. Ask us your questions. Send us your questions. Email us. Make comments on whatever media or platform you're seeing this on right now. Leave your experiences. Has this happened to you? Has it happened to someone you know? Have you seen someone acting suspiciously and you thought to yourself there was a feeling in the pit of your stomach, but you didn't take action because you weren't sure that it could be something bad? Well, report it. Report it, because once they can become aware, then, you know, they could take action. You can email us at mindunfound39@gmail.com. I can say for myself that I have reported a couple of suspicious situations, and every single one that I reported, they ended up being taken to jail. So,
wow.
Well, except for one. So one of them.
Your intuition on that.
Yeah, and one of them, he ended his own life, but you know, that's because the situation had blown so wide open, and there were so many victims that, yeah. But I'm just saying, it makes a difference because I spoke up in that situation. There were no less than 30 victims in this particular situation that I knew about. And now those children were all free of that abuse, and it wouldn't happen to them by that person ever again. You know, I'm not glad that was a decision they chose to take their own life at the end of this, but I am glad that I had the courage to speak up, and you can too. Exactly. You can too. Yeah.
Exactly, because you saved 30 kids. I mean, and that is, you got 30 kids out of that situation. You know, it may, not seem like a lot to some people, but 30 kids is 30 kids. You know, to me, that's a very huge deal, because that's 30 kids that ain't going through that,
Right. Well, and the studies have shown that those children who are exposed to that are so much more likely to not recognize the signs when their children go through it, or to become perpetrators themselves. So when you take them
Yeah.
out of that situation, now you are helping to restore their innocence and the innocence of every single generation to come in that family thereafter,
Right.
because you took that perpetrator out of that circumstance. I mean, that's not to say they
True.
couldn't come again to some other terrible situation, but I mean, if that's not doing good work, I don't know what doing good work is, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, I think that it's great place for us to start, or for us to stop today, don't you? And so be sure to tune in next week, where we're actually going to dive deep into direct energy weapons. Be sure to follow us on Rumble, YouTube, which both have our full episodes up on both of them now, and then as well as on Spotify and X and TikTok. And as always, stay mindful and stay awake.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Bye.